if you don't mind, because we have a live audience, I've given them a primer already, but if you don't mind taking like a 15, 20-second, just who is Ian Bremmer?
I am a political scientist that started a company almost 30 years ago trying to help us all understand where the world is heading. So we've got about 250 people around the world. They're mostly analysts. They cover countries, sectors, themes. It is based in New York City, but it's global. It's certainly not left or right partisan. It's all based on analysis, and that's what I am and who I am and all that.
I love it, man. Well, jumping into the analysis. So, who Trump keeps things interesting. How are you feeling about his handling of the tariffs?
Um, I guess depends on what hour you ask me, since it's changed about 10 times over the course of the last week since Liberation Day. Obviously, the markets don't like it. Most American voters don't like it. Most American allies don't like it, and most American adversaries don't like it. So it's hard to find a policy that has been so universally panned so broadly in such a short period of time. But I think the biggest challenge is the uncertainty, is the fact that the world's most powerful country, the world's strongest economy, is actually driving the most geopolitical uncertainty. And it's doing that in many ways, but principally right now through trade and tariff policy. We have now applied the highest level of global tariffs that the world has seen since the 1930s. But it's been on again, off again in so many ways. Is it 10% or is it more on most countries around the world? Are there going to be major exceptions for certain types of goods? Or is US China going to be in a trade embargo environment? Will there be dramatic changes in 90 days, or will there be further suspensions? Are there going to be a number of huge deals that get cut between the United States and other countries around the world, or will those be underwhelming? All of those things completely unclear a week
At a
into
meta
this
level, though,
process.
do you think that this level of chaos can only be described as negative? Like the uncertainty, just no matter what he's got in mind, the uncertainty is creating an unacceptable level of um, economic trauma, or do you see it some other way?
Um, I'd rather have chaos that gets to a better place than have a trade war with everybody that leads to a fragmentation of the global economy. So I don't think that chaos is the worst possible short-term outcome, but long-term chaos and a lack of trust and an erosion of America's reputational power, reputational capital, where other countries don't trust the United States to do what it says it's going to do, will lead to behavior that we Americans don't like. It'll lead to fewer people sending their kids to be educated in American universities, fewer people wanting to buy real estate in the US from outside the country, fewer people want to work in the United States with high skill set that is difficult to substitute for domestically presently in the US. It'll lead to other countries trying to de-risk their long-term trade and investment exposure to the United States and do deeper deals with each other, like you're seeing with Xi Jinping's trip to Vietnam and across Southeast Asia this week, like you're seeing between the Canadians and the Europeans right now, like you see between the Brazilians and the Europeans right now. I mean, so many other India and UK or Australia and New Zealand. I mean, so much hedging and trying to risk away from a United States that countries feel like they can't have the same level of exposure to that they have historically.
And how do you think this plays out? So he's got, let's say, till the midterms to get this right. Do you see this, as Ray Dalio has warned, as a fundamental breakdown of the international economic order that's going to disrupt all of trade? Or do you think that, nope, he's going to restabilize, everything's going to be fine, bit bumpy, but we're going to be good?
I think that it's in between those two things, Tom. I think when it comes to a lot of American allies that are much smaller than the U.S., they are desperate for deals. So just this week, the Japanese are sending the trade minister and a large delegation with an offer. And that offer will include buying a lot of U.S. LNG. It'll include significant Japanese additional investments into the U.S. In high tech, in automotive, in other areas, and will also include trying to bring the Japanese yen down from the mid 140s to 120 ish, which I don't have a clear policy for yet, but they're trying to formulate one. And I'm sure that will be announced as a huge win by Trump, by Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent, by others. I think the South Koreans are oriented towards a deal. You've got a country like Mexico with a leader that has 85% approval. She can get anything done she wants, and she is trying highly trying to get deals done on greater crackdown on fentanyl trafficking, greater crackdown on illegal migrants coming into the U.S. and the border, all sorts of things that she is trying to get done for America. So I think there will be a number of countries, Tom, where in the next 1-2 months, the Trump administration is able to announce deals, maintains 10% additional tariffs, has additional revenue collection, but things become normalized. But I don't think that's going to be true with Europe. I think with the EU, it's going to be a lot harder. It's 27 countries. They have to coordinate. They're very bureaucratic. They move slowly, and trade is a core competency of the Europeans. I also think that with China, we are in the throes of what feels like a trade war. And even if the Americans pull back more dramatically than they already have, and Trump might well do that, because this morning you may have seen China already said we're not going to buy any more Boeings. Chinese have already started to say that they're going to be tougher on critical minerals exports. These are things that will hit the Americans pretty hard if they're implemented fully. But even if they don't, the Chinese are utterly convinced that the United States wants to contain them. And that means that the two largest economies in the world are going to further decouple from each other. And there will, of course, be significant economic cost globally as a consequence of that. So I don't come down in the camp that this is all the precipice of a disaster and globalization will be completely over. I don't accept that. I think that's overstated. But the idea that Trump is suddenly going to just cut big, beautiful deals with everybody and we can go back to where we were ex ante, except America's in a stronger position, that's clearly not true. And one other reason for that is that the U.S. is not only picking fights on trade, the U.S. is also picking fights in terms of the way it treats other countries and their citizens when they are tourists in the U.S., when they are students in the U.S. They're undermining rule of law in the United States. They are,
You're saying Trump is undermining rule of law.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he's trying to erode the checks and balances that the executive has from the judiciary, from the legislature, and that he's ended the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, for example, suspended that. There's been a bunch of things that the U.S. has done that makes the U.S. feel less trustworthy by allies around
Okay,
the world.
I want to get to that in a minute, but I want to go back first to the implications here in China. So, my belief system rides on the back of one of the following statement is one of the most important pillars of how I'm thinking about this moment, and that is, you absolutely must decouple from China having such control over your manufacturing base. Even if I can't get people on board with that, returning jobs will help the working class here in America. That you can't have your largest military rival, your only pure military rival, control your manufacturing base. So, do you think from that perspective, something had to be done and this may or may not be the right path?
Yes. Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. The United States exported its entire semiconductor industry to Taiwan, 100 miles off of the coast of the PRC, right? I mean, that's easily as stupid, maybe even stupider than the Germans saying we're going to get all of our energy from Russia, right? I mean, it makes short-term market sense, short-term profits for corporations that don't care about the long-term strategic viability of the country, and it undermines the interests of the country. So absolutely, you're right. And my point, and the reason why I was going beyond trade and talking about all of these other issues, is if you are focused on a significant and vulnerable exposure that the United States has to its principal adversary, which, by the way, is at parity with the US in almost every technology that matters and ahead of the United States in a lot of core technologies, then you cannot pick fights with your allies at the same time. You can't drive your allies to do more with China. You bring your
Why do you think he's
allies
doing it?
close.
Why is he doing it? Is he a madman or does he have an agenda?
Oh no, he's not a madman. I mean, he's completely convinced that he's right about everything, and he doesn't listen to experts. And he doesn't have either a lot of policy expertise, nor is he patient to get it. And so, he basically says, "Well, I've always been convinced that these countries are all ripping us off." China and Europe and Mexico and Canada, and even countries where the US runs trade surpluses like Australia and Brazil, and America's the strongest country in the world, and I'm 78, and they just tried to assassinate me. They shot me in the head, so I don't have much time. I need to do all this now, so I'm just going to use my power, my position of strength, and beat up on everybody simultaneously. And that
What's going
is,
to be
and
the
he doesn't
result of
think
that?
he needs allies. Doesn't think he needs allies. Thinks he
What's
can
going
do
to
it
be
all
the
by himself.
result, though? Is America going to end up isolated? Do
More
we have enough juice to isolate China?
No, not by ourselves. I mean, again, Tom, you hit on the correct point, which is that there is a big country out there that is not only an adversary to the US, but has the ability long term to outcompete the US unless we are smart. And if we want to win, if we want to ensure that our economy is actually working and that we have a level of sovereignty over our decisions in the US and globally, we need to be out competing the Chinese. So, for example, the CHIPS Act, which is one of the smartest things that Biden did and is completely aligned with Trump's desire to outcompete China and reshore semiconductors in the US, Trump has said he's going to blow up. Why? Because it was Biden's. That's just stupid. It's just stupid, right? You can't play politics with something this important. You have to get out of your way and you have to think about what's in the country's interest long term. And so maybe you do have fights with the Europeans, but you don't fight them simultaneously. Maybe you are concerned that you want to redo your deal with the Mexicans and Canadians, which Trump got done to begin with, the USMCA. That was Trump's deal. And now he's telling the Canadians 51st state. And now he's telling the Mexicans, 25% automotive tariffs. He's picking these huge fights at the same time that he's trying to address a long-term structural deep issue that really matters with the Chinese. And he's driving other countries away from America.
All
America's
right, you said something about Trump that I thought was very interesting. And that was by far the most dysfunctional and kleptocratic, referring to America, and unfree political system of the advanced industrial democracies. Um, Talk to me about the kleptocratic part. How do you see Trump fitting into that? Is Trump a cause, a symptom? If we wanted to map your mind about the character of Trump as it will play out politically, what are the few beliefs about him that we would need to understand?
Well, I said that in a structural way. It is getting worse under Trump, but it is not new. The idea that Trump is responsible for kleptocracy in the United States is farcical. The US has been by far the most coin operated of advanced industrial democracies for decades. I mean, one thing that almost all Americans agree on is that the United States is the most politically dysfunctional and kleptocratic of advanced political systems. Americans agree on that. They just don't agree on the cause.
Hmm.
A lot of
What
people would say, oh, well, it's because of the Democrats. Others would say, oh, it's because of Trump. When the reality is, it's a dual system where people with money have access to power and have different standards in terms of policing and rule of law applying to them than people that don't have that money. And we see that operate. We've seen it operate for decades now. That's why it costs billions of dollars to run our election, and it takes over a year to get done. The Canadians have an election that costs a few $1 million and takes 5 weeks. Um, which system is more democratic? Obviously not ours, right? I mean, those companies expect to get something for the billions of dollars that they donate to American political campaigns. And they do get something. They get outcomes. I mean, we saw this with TikTok, right? Trump used to be opposed to TikTok. He said it was a national security concern. He was concerned about it before Biden was. And then he got lots of money from Jeff Yass and other investors into TikTok, and he did a complete 180 on the issue. Now it's no longer a national security concern. Now he's willing to cut a deal. Now he's extending the lifespan of TikTok without a deal, even as he's putting 145% tariffs on the Chinese. Why? Well, because the investors to TikTok are getting what they paid for. And that's true for crypto, and it's true for oil and gas. And on the Democratic side, it's been true for big pharma, and it's true for retail. It's true for trial lawyers. I mean, you goes on and on and on. This is a huge problem, and Trump was elected in part because it was seen as a huge problem, but he is not going to fix it. I mean, he's actually, in my view, made it considerably worse. When you take the wealthiest person in the world, you give them a political position and more access to the presidency than anybody else, at the same time that he continues to own and run, sort of 6 major multinational corporations. It's hard to even identify what a conflict of interest is in that environment.
Let me give you my take on that. Obviously, I have a frame of reference as a longtime entrepreneur. I get that that's going to have skewed my worldview very dramatically. I look at Elon Musk and I say, you have literally, for sure, the greatest living capital allocator, full stop. Um, Possibly the greatest capital allocator ever. What he's doing is just absolutely unbelievable in the world of business. And you get him to focus on doing things inside of the government to help us allocate capital well. For me, while I obviously understand the potential conflict of interest, um, I want this cabinet of very effective business operators to come in and point out systems that are broken, how we can fix them, where there's fraud, waste, and abuse, not to get sucked into the typical language there. But that all makes sense to me. And given the level of transparency that the Trump administration has put forward, I'm very open to saying, okay, cool. These guys are proximity to power for sure. They're going to be able to make policies that are good for them, but we can see everything that's happening. And I would rather have these guys than the historical bureaucrats that I've gotten playing these kind of roles. Um, do you have a similarly charitable view, or do you think that I'm so distorted by my years as an entrepreneur that I cannot see the kleptocracy that's happening right before my eyes?
No, I appreciate your honesty. I always have, Tom. And of course, I mean, I'm a political scientist, but I mean, I started a multinational corporation myself. I'm a founder. I'm an entrepreneur. And I never would have the success that I've had if I didn't start in the United States, which is a system that so, um, you know, promotes entrepreneurship, unlike what we see in Europe, for example, unlike what we see in Japan, for example. So, and I mean, I'm not a rocket scientist I'm not an electric car whiz, so I don't have an ability to judge Elon as an entrepreneur except for by looking at his results. But this is a guy that has shown, right, that he can build world-class corporations at scale, or at least lead them and finance them, right? So, I mean, clearly he deserves, I think, a lot of attention and credit for that. I have no problem with that. And if he was prepared to put those companies in a blind trust, I would have no problem. In fact, I would welcome his talent in trying to create more efficiencies in the United States government. I don't like the idea of people that have expertise in one area believing they have expertise in every area. And so I see Elon as opining on democratic systems in Europe and saying that the AfD should win and showing up on video calls with them, which is considered to be a neo-Nazi party by a strong majority of German citizens. And the rest of the government won't work with them because of that. I think he's damaging the United States and its core alliances by doing that. And he's doing it inside the Trump administration. I have a serious problem with that. And I also have a problem with him meeting with Narendra Modi in Blair House, which is part of the White House complex. And it's not clear whether he's doing it in his official capacity running Doge or his unofficial capacity building business. When Trump was asked by a journalist that evening, Trump answered honestly. They said, in what capacity is Elon meeting Modi? And Trump said, I don't know. And I mean, that's the right answer. How could Trump know? He could be doing either, both, who knows? But that's not okay. I mean, if Modi came to the United States and brought, Ambani or Adani into a meeting with Trump or met with Trump separately, we in the United States, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, would say that India was becoming a banana republic. Like, that's just not acceptable, all right? So, but the fact that the United States government is now doing that, I think really undermines capability. So, I mean, in short, I think that what Elon is bringing to Doge, the fact that we now have some world-class AI and technology capabilities that otherwise would never be applied to a very bureaucratized U.S. regulatory system, and is going to look for regulations that are destructive of value, that are overlapping in different departments. I think there are a lot of countries around the world that are going to take that as a model and try to do the same thing inside their countries, and they won't be as effective. So I think there will be efficiencies that come from Doge. It is clear that that's not the only thing that they're doing, and I truly mistrust the conflict of interest, especially for someone already worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Like, he doesn't need more money. So it would be trivial for him to put his companies in blind trust and not have those conflicts of interest if he so chose. He chose not to. And I cannot afford as an American citizen to give him the benefit of the doubt for choosing not to have rules that apply to everybody else in U.S. politics. Over 200 years of history, those rules should not suddenly apply to Elon. I'm not okay with giving him the benefit of the doubt for that. I'm very interested in your views on that, Tom.
We'll get back to the show in just a moment, but first, here is a tax strategy most people miss while rushing to file by April 15th. Most people only focus on filing, missing the chance to contribute thousands of dollars to their IRA. This is where I Trust Capital can really change the game. While traditional IRAs limit you to stocks and bonds, I Trust Capital lets you invest in cryptocurrency, physical gold, and silver, all with the same powerful tax advantages. Their platform gives you 24/7 access to buy and sell alternative assets with no monthly fees and minimal transaction costs. They handle everything, setting up your new IRA, facilitating transfers or rollovers, all necessary IRS reporting, and unlimited secure storage with institutional partners. Just visit itrustcapital.com/ impact and use code IMPACT when you sign up to fund your account to get a $100 bonus. Again, that's itrustcapital.com/impact and use code IMPACT. This is a paid advertisement. And now let's get back to the show. So I think that level of friction is good. I think it's good that you and I view this very differently. Because I believe that the best ideas are arrived at not by one person convincing somebody else, but by there being dynamic tension between the two and them having to find this compromised way forward. So I think it's good given how hard I have worked in my life to achieve the kind of success that Elon has achieved and found it with my talent and intelligence and interests just not possible. He's excelling on a level that my imagination failed to offer as a possibility. Like until I saw it, I did not think running that many companies, engaging with the world at the level of engineering would yield the kind of results that he's done. So I think it's wise to be skeptical, but at the same time, for me, I come at it with, I want the smartest people on planet Earth aimed at the problem of making America the most successful country, and then getting a sensible immigration policy so that we can continue to be a beacon for all the people all the world over to come here and to out China by being the most American thing ever and not by trying to out China by being better at being Chinese. And so in that milieu, I get that I'm taking a risk, but I fall on the other side of that where I'm like, I get it. It's different. It's a breach in decorum. I might look at it funny if I didn't align with the things that he's done in life are the exact kind of things that I've tried to do. And I know how hard they are. And for whatever success I've had, it was extremely difficult. And so for him to be able to do it at such a scale, I'm just like, yes, that's the kind of person that I want aimed at this problem. But you brought up AI earlier, and I know the community here is very eager to hear you give us your view. I, for one, think AI is a meteorite screaming towards the earth. And not that it's going to destroy everything, but that nothing will be the same. Literally nothing, top to bottom, nothing will be the same on the other side of this. I'm so curious to get your take, what you think the impacts of AI are going to be.
I agree. And look, in the context of that, there's going to be so much change in the geopolitical system and the economic system and how societies function in the next 5 years because of AI. Maybe the conversations we're having about, is it problematic or not for Elon to have a conflict of interest? Maybe we're rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, right? Maybe it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Maybe, your point is like, you just need to go all in on your smartest people. And if that means the US ends up to be less of a democracy, well, hey, if we're efficient and we can grow and we can outcompete China, maybe that's fine. We weren't much of a democracy anyway. There are a lot of Americans that feel that way. There are a lot of Americans that say, look, I've given these guys a chance, Democrats and Republicans, for the last 40 years, and all they've done is enrich themselves. They haven't actually taken care of the average American. So why do I care so much about this ostensible democracy? Why don't I just go with people who are going to like break a bunch of things? And I think that's, Planet Elon in that regard is quite popular, especially to a lot of young men who haven't felt so good about where the leadership of America has been driving them. So I get that. Now, in an AI front, I think here is an area that is, even the last 3 months, if you look at these new models that are, they're world-class capabilities, they're out competing, humans in top math competitions, in science competitions. High level employees in almost every sector are now using AI to improve their work. And I think it's a very short leap from that to displacement of very large numbers of white collar workers. You've got tens of thousands of people in New York and in London doing risk management in banking industry. I think we're a year and a half away from needing 10% of those employees, for example. Whoa. Right? I see this happening in
crazy.
so many industries, including my own. I mean, there's so many things that are happening inside my company that like we have to every month rethink, okay, are our employees capable of using this technology well, or are they going to get displaced? And
Yeah.
being very open and honest with it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because
same here.
otherwise someone's going to do it. So I do see it as completely transformative. For me, the thing that I find most interesting, which is coming like this year, is as AI starts training on our individual data, either on the cloud or eventually on our smartphones. Because right now, you and I, the most dysfunctional thing that we do in associating ourselves with the world around us is that when we open our smartphone, we are on like 100 different apps. We're going from one to the other to the other. You and I just experienced that in trying to get this live stream going, right? Now, that is going to change radically when
Mm.
AI starts training on us. We will have an individual AI agent. And so instead of just being able to use AI to have a voice, suddenly we're going to use an AI to act for us. It'll become our most essential relationship that knows us better than any person does.
Yep.
And that I think is really going to change humanity. It'll make us much more capable. It'll bring knowledge on world-class knowledge on medicine, on training and education,
That's gonna be huge.
on business to human beings that have access to it, no matter what country they're living in,
Yep.
whether or not they have infrastructure around them. All they need is that smartphone and that app. So they just need access to a battery, electricity, and then they're off to the races. They're globalized. But it also is going to change how we think, who we are, how we interact with others. And for people that don't have it, they're not going to be like human beings. And I worry a lot about that. I don't think that we have the governance and the society structure to handle that kind of transformation that quickly. So
I'm
it's
gonna need
super
more words on
exciting.
that. So I wrote a comic book, this is 5 or 6 years ago now, exploring this moment, and the punchline of my, comic was that there would be an inevitable schism between what I'll now call the new Puritans who refuse to embrace AI, who refuse to integrate technology into their body, and then people that embrace it whole hog. And that still is how I think that this is going to play out, that there becomes a religious friction between people who believe that integrating technology and going that deep on AI is somehow an affront to God. And I think that's going to create the schism. But I hear you saying something slightly differently. So where do you think the friction point is?
Um, I think your friction point is real. I am a little less worried about that than I am about the, say, 2, 3 billion people that won't have access to AI even though they'd like it.
Because they can't afford
Um,
it? Because governments keep them from accessing it?
I suspect more the former than the latter. I think that we're likely to have a period of, it might be 10 years, it might be 1 year, but look, there's been a digital divide, and you've got a whole bunch of people that don't have access to the internet right now around the world. And they're still able to exist in this economy and society. It's just, there's a huge gap there, right? But with AI, you're talking about creating something that's different from Homo sapiens, right? I mean, once you are engaging with AI real time, it's changing who you are. It's changing your brain function and capacity. You're becoming kind of a hybrid, right? And you wouldn't be able to imagine not engaging with it real time. You'll never shut it off, right? And I think that those people that don't have access to that um, will lose. Uh, the, they may gain something in terms of existential humanity. That's a philosophical conversation. But in terms of access to power and capital and the ability to like develop and grow in a society that is speeding up ever faster, those are people that will not be treated as fellow humans. And
Wow,
we've
that's
always been bad at that, right? And
yes, we have. That's very interesting. All right, I could go on for that forever, but we have you. You're such an expert on what's going on in Russia, Ukraine. If you don't mind, give us a quick take. Trump had talked about, I'm going to end this war on day one. Needless to say, I don't think anybody believed that was going to happen. It
no,
didn't happen. It seems to be stalling out. No, no, he's even said, "Look, I was being somewhat sarcastic," I think is his exact quote. Is Putin playing games? Does Putin have any interest in resolving this, or is this gonna drag out for years?
so Trump has used a carrot and stick approach on Russia, Ukraine. The problem is that he's used stick against Ukraine and carrot against Russia when he should be using a more even handed approach. His stick approach against Ukraine has been effective, in my view. I was just with the former Ukrainian foreign minister here in my office a few days ago, and he admitted as such, which is, he wasn't super comfortable with it. But the fact was that when Trump suspended intelligence and military support to Ukraine, which Biden never would have done, and he didn't suspend it forever. He suspended it for a couple weeks. But the Ukrainians took notice and they were like, okay, we cannot mess around with this guy because we will lose the war very quickly. So if he's telling us that he wants a ceasefire unconditionally, we have to give him a ceasefire unconditionally. And that is indeed what Ukraine did. He demanded it, and Ukraine immediately said, yes, sir. Right. So now you have Trump going to Putin saying, okay, let's have a conversation about a ceasefire. And Trump's talking about all the things the Americans can do with Russia. They can end the sanctions and they can co-invest in the Arctic. And they can work together on, sort of the Middle East, all these things. And yet he hasn't been saying, and if you don't, like there's going to be holy hell to pay. And Putin
He's
for the
starting to
last
talk a little bit more like that now. I don't know if you think he's serious. He the only thing he can do that's really gonna disrupt Russia is, stop their exporting of oil and natural gas. Do you think he'll really play that card?
That's not true. There are lots of things he can do. He can
Say
say,
more.
and Russia, if you don't uh, agree to a ceasefire, I'm going to provide a lot more support to Ukraine.
Yeah, sorry, I
I'm
meant
going to.
non-militarily.
Oh well, but actually, Trump's own advisors, like Keith Kellogg, I mean, were saying that before the inauguration. They were saying that, look, if there's a deal, great, and if there's not, I'm going to hit you hard. And that is the reality. That they've also talked about sanctions directly on the Russian central bank. They've talked they've talked about taking sanctions against Russian energy export, which would bring oil prices up, but in an environment where OPEC is pumping a lot more and where prices are so low that the American frackers are actually starting to pull back on drilling because it's no longer profitable. There's a lot more flexibility for Trump to hit the Chinese and the Indians on that front. I mean, we've got oil prices that have been touching under 60 right now. That's very
Whoa.
different than when they're at 80, right? So,
Mhm.
yeah, I do think there's flexibility, but it's interesting that Trump in the last just 24 hours, right, has been talking about, well, this was Ukraine and Biden's war. This wasn't Putin responsible for it. I mean, it's been an interesting issue. It's the one foreign policy issue where you can consistently see a difference in what Trump is saying publicly from what his own advisors are saying. And you don't see that on Iran, you don't see it on Gaza, you don't see it on China, but on Russia, Trump has been so much more cautious about a willingness to ever say anything critical about Putin. And at this point, Putin is starting to make Trump look weak on this issue. He's starting to imply that I don't need to actually do anything that you're telling me. I don't need a ceasefire. I can just keep going. I can launch missiles and kill dozens of people, including kids, on Palm Sunday, which you saw direct condemnation from a number of U.S. top officials You saw it from Marco Rubio, Secretary of State. You saw it from Rick Grinnell, Special Envoy. You saw it from Kellogg. You didn't see it from Trump. Trump said, "Well, no, the Kremlin told me that was a mistake." Usually,
Do
Trump doesn't usually give the benefit of the doubt to folks like that.
Well,
So
people
it's
think he does to Putin all the time. Do you think that he is a shill for Putin, or do you think there's another take on this?
there's no reason to think he's a shill. I mean, we've never had evidence. I need evidence before I'm willing to make an argument like that. I think that Putin certainly has historically treated Trump a lot more nicely on an individual level than European leaders have.
Mm.
Like, I remember when Trump was first president, he attended the G20 in Hamburg, and, he went across the table and sat down with Putin because he felt like the Europeans treat him like Obama used to treat him, that he thinks that he's a rube, he's rude, he's an idiot, doesn't deserve his position. Where, I mean, Putin's kind of like Mohammed bin Salman, like, he's just one of the guys, right? Hangs out. So I think there's some of that. And I also think that Trump literally doesn't like the EU. I disagree with him strongly on this. He believes that a strong European Union is bad for the US because they get together and they coordinate their policy against the US. He
Mm.
would rather see a fragmentation so that those individual countries are weaker and have to do bilateral deals with the US that's stronger. I think in a world where China's a big adversary, Russia's an adversary, having stronger allies is actually important for the United States. Trump disagrees. He just fundamentally disagrees. That's a real point of contention between the two of our worldviews. But I don't see, I think what Trump just wants a deal with Putin, thinks he can get one. You'll remember President Bush, right? Jr. Looked into Putin's eyes and saw his soul. Trump would not be the first leader that has good meetings with Putin and thinks that, sort of that's going to lead to a breakthrough in the relationship. But it's not. And Trump is going to have, if he wants a ceasefire, and he does, he's going to have to actually push Putin a lot harder and more directly than he has been willing to do heretofore.
Hmm. All right, I know we have to let you go. Before we do you have a quick take on what's going on Israel Gaza? How you feeling about that?
Well, let me first say something positive about Trump in the Middle East, which is that his Iran opening is a big one. And I think he is reasonably likely to succeed.
Hmm.
The Iranians are in a very weak position right now. They have lost control over their proxies across the region. You'll remember with Signalgate, Vice President Vance was saying, "Oh, this is a horrible thing, and I should really tell Trump that he shouldn't go ahead with this war. It's going to hurt the Americans." But nobody else wanted to back him up, and Stephen Miller shut it down, so he didn't actually tell Trump he opposed it. Well, now we're a few weeks into America going after the Houthis. No American soldiers have been killed in battle, and the Houthis are now basically telling the Americans, "Okay, if you please stop, we'll stop attacking shipping that's going through the Red Sea." So that looks like a win. And now the Iranians, who said they wanted nothing to do with the Americans, are willing to do direct talk. So this has been Trump using a fist to get to a place of peace. And the meeting that the Israeli prime minister had with Trump a week ago in the White House was almost as bad as Zelensky's trip to the Oval last month. And I mean, for everyone that says that Trump is, in Israel's pocket, and yes, he certainly supports a lot of things that Israel is doing, but he was willing to make sure that Bibi knew who the boss was. Bibi wanted the tariffs to come off, and Trump said, "We give you billions a year, and you should be appreciative about that, sir." And Erdogan's our friend, and we like his policy in Syria right now. We don't like what you're saying. And by the way, we're about to engage in direct talks with the Iranians, and we're not going to engage in military strikes against their nuclear capabilities the way you want to drag us into a war, Bibi. So I give Trump full marks on the way he handled that conversation. Now, on Gaza, the U.S. here is losing a lot of support around the world because, it's not just defending Israel after the heinous terrorist acts of October 7th. It's now supporting Israel in occupying over 50% of Gaza, right? And cutting off completely all humanitarian aid to the Palestinians in Gaza for the last month. And that is unconscionable behavior. It is clearly unacceptable to the international community. But we, the United States, apparently have no problem with it. And we're also prepared to deport American residents with green cards that are critical of that policy, that we have not accused credibly of any crimes. And that fundamentally is opposed to free speech, which I firmly oppose. I mean, free speech is an essential right for everyone that lives in this country. And we've decided it doesn't actually apply to a whole class of folks. And I think that sends a very bad message to those that we want to attract to our great nation.
Help me
And we'll
think
have a
more
hard
clearly
time.
about this one, because I'm very hardcore about free speech. It is one of the hills that I would quite literally die on. And at the same time, I believe that we have an obligation to protect our culture. And it's like in my company, we have this thing called principles. I actually came from Ray Dalio. And Ray Dalio talks about this. When you open up a culture so that people can say anything they want, you find that they will go and attack the foundations of your system. Now, I believe an American citizen should be able to attack those systems. Because you're a citizen and you have the full protection of the law. But if you are coming in as a green card holder who is not a citizen, I'm married to a green card holder, so let me be very clear. I will have to suffer the consequences if this goes in the wrong direction. But I do believe that we're in a position right now where if we don't establish that America does have a culture, that we have values that are worth protecting, we're going to end up losing that culture, and the paper that things are written on are only as good as the culture that backs them up.
No,
And
I agree with
so
you.
how
I
do
do.
we dance this dance?
I agree with that. But that means that our leaders have to stand for those values. They have to actually live as examples of those values. And I do not believe, I mean, we're not talking about students that are standing for Hamas. We're talking about students that oppose ethnic cleansing. We're talking about students that stand for rule of law. These are students that would support Ukrainians just as they would support Palestinians. And I think it is important, as someone whose own grandmother was Armenian fleeing genocide. And by the way, ethnic cleansing just committed against the Armenians, 120,000 in Nagorno-Karabakh that were forced out of their territory. The land's been taken, and Americans barely said boo. Just happened because that's the way of the world right now. But the
Who
United
pushed
States
in?
has supposed what?
Who pushed in?
Azerbaijan supported by Turkey. I know, barely made news. Nobody
I didn't
cares.
hear
It's
about
just
it.
the Armenians. But I mean, we could talk about all this stuff's happening. South Sudan right now, the DRC right now. I mean, there's so many places that, a lot of people suffering, but there aren't any journalists on the ground. There are no economic interests, so we don't care. But, in the case of Israel, Palestine, of course, there's a lot more focus, a lot more tension. Russia, Ukraine, a lot more focus, a lot more tension. The point is that we need to stand for rule of law. We need to stand for the ability of human beings around the world to experience personal liberties, the ability to make a life for themselves and their children. And we, America, are falling down on that, both at home and around the world right now. And that is, I think, why this moment feels so fractious. We have to start standing for the things that our founders believed in to a much greater degree. And we need to look at ourselves and ask ourselves, first and foremost, how are we not living up to that? I fully agree that if you have someone that shouldn't be in this country legally, we should be addressing that. And the Democrats lost badly, in part because they failed to address something that was clearly a matter of rule of law in the United States. They were allowing people to take advantage of an America that wasn't upholding its own laws. That's where American leaders are failing. And they're failing on the left and they're failing on the right. But to allow green card holding students to get caught up in identity politics and partisan warfare, that's not what America stands for. America stands for due process for everybody in this country. And that's why people try to come here from everywhere, because they understand that this is not just a place to make money. It's also a place where we respect individual liberty. And we're losing that.
I hear that. Well, Ian, thank you so much for joining us, man. It was an honor to have you as the very first guest to join us during Alive. It was wonderful. This was fantastic.
Thanks,
Since you're here, where can people engage with you?
G0media.com is where they can follow all of the work that our media company puts out. And you can also follow me on whether it's the Twitter sphere or, sort of LinkedIn or wherever else you want at Ian Bremmer. All of those things work. And if you send me a note, I do my damnedest to respond.
Awesome. Brother, thank you again so much, man. I really appreciate it.
One of these days we'll do it in person and live. It'll be a lot of fun.
I would love that, man. I would love that. All right. Until then.
So you got to tell me where I can get that jacket, right? Because like if we were twinsies, we'd be like trading places or something.
There we go. See, now that spirit I like. I'll send you a link.
There you go.
All right, brother. Take care.
Be good. Bye.
Peace out. Bye. If you like this conversation, check out this episode to learn more. Sun Tzu famously said, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting." But in today's high-stakes tensions between America, China, and Russia, what if the ultimate battlefield isn't military, it's economic? Today's guest, Edward Fishman.